She drained our life savings while I was deployed, then divorced me by email. But that wasn't the worst part. When I finally got home, I couldn't even unlock my own front door. The house was up for sale, and the man selling it? Chase Donnelly, our real estate agent, the same guy who used to call me brother while eating dinner at my table, was now sleeping with my wife and flipping my house for profit. She didn't just leave, she took everything. But here's what she didn't know. I had one card left to play. And once I made my move, she'd be forced to watch me take back everything she stole. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is James Rourke, and I'm 43 years old. After 20 years in the Army, my life runs like a well-oiled machine. Wake up at 500 hours, PT, duties, and those quiet evening video calls with my wife Amy from the barracks. I send half my paycheck home to her for our joint account, trusting her to handle the finances while I focus on these final months before retirement. The familiar, bitter scent of instant coffee fills my cup as I check my phone again. Another missed call from Amy. My stomach tightens, that same knot I've been pushing away. She's been different lately, shorter conversations, distracted eyes, quick goodbyes. What she doesn't know is that I've already started the paperwork on that lakefront property, planning it as a retirement surprise. But let me start from the beginning. The base's internet connection was spotty that morning, typical for that part of the world. I'd been trying to load my email for 20 minutes, watching that little circle spin while the ancient computer wheezed and groaned. You know that moment when something feels off, but you can't put your finger on it? That was me, staring at the subject line, "Let's not drag this out." My coffee went cold beside the keyboard as I read it 3 times, trying to make the words mean something different. Amy's lawyer had processed our divorce using the power of attorney I'd left her, standard procedure for deployed soldiers. She'd cited emotional neglect as grounds. The joint account? Empty. All $117,000 of our savings gone. Just like that, 15 years of marriage disappeared into electrons and legal jargon. "Hey, Rourke, you okay?" Martinez called from 2 computers down. "Looking kinda pale there, brother." I minimized the screen, my hands shaking. "Yeah, just need some air." Outside the communications building, I pulled out my phone. Amy's number was still on speed dial. Muscle memory had me hitting it before I could think. "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." I tried texting. Nothing. Facebook showed we weren't connected anymore. Email bounced back. She'd cut every line, sealed every crack. Surgical precision. The walk back to my quarters felt like moving through quicksand. Remember those old Warner Brothers cartoons where the character walks off a cliff but doesn't fall until they look down? That was me, suspended in that moment before gravity kicks in. You spend 20 years in the Army. You learn to compartmentalize, keep moving, complete the mission. But this was different. This was someone reaching inside and pulling out everything that made sense. "Sergeant Rourke," a young private caught me outside the barracks. "Colonel Matthews wants to see you, sir." The colonel's office always smelled like old leather and coffee. He had this way of looking at you like he could see right through to your backbone. "Take a seat, Jim." I did. The leather creaked under me like it was sharing my discomfort. "Your wife's lawyer contacted JAG office this morning," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "I'm sorry, son, but there's something else we need to discuss." The something else turned out to be a ticking clock I didn't even know existed. Military pension rules require a permanent address within 60 days of discharge. No address, no pension. 20 years of service hanging by a thread because I suddenly had nowhere to call home. "But sir, I've got less than 6 months left." "I know, Jim. And normally we'd have transition housing available. But with the new base renovation project," he spread his hands. "Look, take the rest of the day. Process this. We'll figure something out." Back in my bunk that night, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the barracks, boots on concrete, distant laughter, someone's music bleeding through thin walls. 20 years ago, these sounds meant brotherhood, purpose. Now they just reminded me how temporary everything was. I pulled out my phone one more time, opened Amy's contact. Her photo was still there, us at last year's Christmas party, her green eyes bright with laughter. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't press it. Not yet. "Hey, you missed Chow," Martinez said, appearing in my doorway. He took one look at my face and stepped inside, closing the door. "What's going on, man?" I just handed him my phone, email still open. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, reading. "All of it? She took all of it?" I nodded, throat too tight for words. "Does anyone else know?" "Just the colonel." I sat up, rubbing my face. "Look, keep this quiet, okay? Last thing I need is—" "Say no more, brother." He handed the phone back. "But you can't handle this alone. Whatever you need, I'm here." The thing about betrayal is it doesn't hit all at once. It comes in waves. First, the shock, then the anger, then this hollow feeling like someone scooped out your insides with a rusty spoon. But the worst part? The questions. Where was she now? Why didn't she just talk to me? And how the hell was I going to secure housing with no savings and a ticking clock on my pension? The military transport touched down at 600 hours. Felt strange being back on U.S. soil, strangers still knowing I had nowhere to really call home. I'd taken a cab straight from the base, my duffel bag riding shotgun like a silent companion. The driver kept glancing at me in the rear view, probably wondering why a guy in fatigues looked so damn lost. "Just up here on the left," I said, pointing to what used to be my house. What used to be our house? The cab pulled up, and my heart stopped. There it was. A for sale sign stabbed into the front lawn like a knife in my gut. One of those plastic real estate signs with a familiar logo. Donnelly Properties. Chase's Company. A lockbox hung on the front door handle, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. You know that feeling when you're dreaming and everything's just slightly wrong? That's what it felt like standing there. The grass needed cutting. Amy's garden, usually bursting with color, looked abandoned. Even the welcome mat was gone. I paid the driver and walked up the path I'd laid myself 3 summers ago. Remember mixing that concrete in July heat, Amy bringing out cold lemonade every hour? Now my boots crunched on dead leaves. Nobody had bothered to rake. "Need some help there, sir?" A voice startled me. The neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, peering over her fence. "Oh my, Jim, when did you get back?" "Just now." My voice sounded hollow even to me. "Mrs. Peterson, have you seen Amy?" Her face did that thing people's faces do when they've got bad news, but don't want to be the one delivering it. "Oh, honey, she moved out weeks ago. Had some guys come with a truck?" "I tried calling, but your number wasn't working." I thanked her and stood there a while longer, staring at that lockbox. 20 years of service, and I couldn't even get into my own house. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so damn painful. The bank was my next stop. The teller's face told me everything before she even pulled up my account. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rourke. The joint account was closed 3 weeks ago. All funds were transferred to a private account we're not authorized to discuss." I sat in my truck in the bank parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. $117,000. Gone. Our entire savings, everything we'd built together, vanished like morning dew. I drove. No destination, just drove. Past the high school where Amy taught. Past the coffee shop where we had our first date. Past the hardware store where we'd spent countless Saturdays picking out paint colors and arguing about power tools. Every landmark felt like a punch to the gut. Finally, I called Mike, an old army buddy who'd settled nearby. "Brother, I hate to ask." "Get your ass over here." He cut me off. "Guest room's yours as long as you need it." That night, sprawled on Mike's couch with a beer I wasn't tasting, my phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, one of Amy's coworkers who'd always been decent to me. "Jim, I don't know if you're back yet, but you should know. I saw Amy at Riverside Mall yesterday. She was with Chase Donnelly. They looked close. I'm so sorry." The bottle in my hand cracked, not enough to break, just enough to remind me I needed to ease up. Chase fucking Donnelly. Our real estate agent. The guy who'd helped us look at investment properties. Who'd sat at our dinner table laughing at my bad jokes and calling me brother. "You okay over there?" Mike called from his kitchen. "Chase Donnelly," I said, the name tasting like poison. "She's with Chase Donnelly." Mike came around the corner, face dark. "The real estate guy? That slick bastard who sold you the Anderson property?" I nodded, too tired to speak. The rage was there, building like a pressure cooker, but exhaustion had the upper hand. 20 hours of travel, the empty house, the cleaned-out account, and now this. It was too much to process. "Get some sleep," Mike said, clapping my shoulder. "Tomorrow we start figuring this out." But sleep wouldn't come. I lay there in Mike's guest room, staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazy circles, thinking about time, about the 60-day clock ticking down on my pension, about the years I'd spent building a life that had vanished in 3 weeks, about Chase Donnelly, who probably thought he'd pulled off the perfect heist, my wife, my money, my house. The fan kept spinning, and so did my thoughts, each rotation bringing me closer to something that felt like clarity. Or maybe it was just the calm that comes when you've hit bottom and realize there's nowhere to go but up. Mike's guest room was temporary. We both knew it. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside a beat-up Winnebago parked in Tommy Martinez's backyard. Tommy, another vet I'd served with, had bought it cheap at an estate sale, planning to fix it up someday. "She ain't pretty," Tommy said, tossing me a set of keys, "but she's dry, and the propane works." The door creaked open with a sound that reminded me of old war movies, when submarines dive too deep. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and diesel fumes, the kind that stick to your clothes and follow you around all day. Remember those field exercises where we'd spend weeks living in abandoned buildings? This felt worse somehow. "You sure about this, man?" Tommy asked, hovering by the door. "My couch is still." "I'm sure." I needed my own space, even if it was just 20 feet of musty 1985 Winnebago. "Thanks, brother." That first night was a reality check. Ever sit down and count every dollar you own in the world? It's a sobering experience, let me tell you. I spread everything out on the fold-down table. My last pay stub, bank statements, receipts. The math was brutal. After basic expenses, I had maybe 3 weeks before I'd be completely tapped out. And that pension clock? Still ticking. The RV's ceiling fan squeaked with every rotation, keeping time like some kind of countdown timer. I'd been through worse, right? Baghdad in 03, Kandahar in 08. But this was different. On deployment, you always knew who the enemy was. Here, I couldn't even get my wife, ex-wife, on the phone. Next morning, I started calling lawyers. Ever notice how they all sound the same on the phone? Professional, sympathetic, right up until they quote their retainer fees. 5,000 here, 7,000 there. Might as well have been asking for $1 million. By the 4th call, I was just going through the motions. Then I remembered Ed Mallory. Ed had been my platoon sergeant during my 2nd tour, the kind of NCO who taught you things they don't cover in any manual. Last I'd heard, he was working with the VA in Springfield, helping vets navigate the benefits maze. It was a 3-hour drive, but what else was I doing? The VA building looked exactly like you'd expect, all concrete and faded signs, with a parking lot full of bumper stickers telling various politicians where they could go. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed that same tune they've hummed since 1973. Ed's office was at the end of a long hallway. The door was open, and there he sat, barrel-chested as ever, beard a little grayer but still thick as steel wool. He looked up from his computer, and his eyes narrowed. "Well, holy shit." He stood up, limping slightly. That old injury from Fallujah never quite healed right. "Jim Rourke, you look like hammered dog crap, son." I managed a weak smile. "Good to see you too, Sergeant." "It's just Ed now." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down before you fall down." I sat. The chair creaked. Ed watched me with those sharp eyes that could always tell when something was wrong. "Talk," he said. So I did. Laid it all out. The email, the money, Chase, the pension deadline, everything. Ed didn't interrupt. just listened with his jaw getting tighter by the minute. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, the springs protesting. "You try lawyers?" he asked. "Can't afford them." Ed nodded, like he'd expected that answer. He pulled open his desk drawer and took out a business card, plain white, with black text. "Veterans Legal Aid Foundation," he said, sliding it across the desk. "Non-profit. They handle cases like yours, pro bono. Director's an old ranger I served with in Desert Storm." My hand shook slightly as I picked up the card. "They any good?" "They're sharks with hearts of gold." Ed's eyes hardened. "And they especially love cases involving power of attorney abuse." I stared at that card like it was some kind of lifeline. Maybe it was. "Ed, I don't know how to—" "Stop." He held up a hand. "You took care of my sorry ass in Kandahar when that IED hit our convoy. Consider this partial repayment." Ed's contact at the Veterans Legal Aid Foundation turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman named Maria Torres. She had the kind of focused intensity you usually only see in bomb disposal techs: methodical, precise, and absolutely fearless. Military spouses using power of attorney to clean out accounts. She shook her head, spreading files across her desk. More common than you'd think. But that doesn't make it legal. I shifted in my chair, the leather squeaking beneath me. Ed sat beside me, quiet but alert, like he was back on patrol. "So there's something we can do?" "There's always something." Maria pulled out a stack of bank statements. "But first, we need to establish a pattern. When did you first give Amy power of attorney?" The next 4 hours felt like defusing a bomb in slow motion. We dug through everything: bank records, property documents, tax returns. My eyes were burning from squinting at statement after statement, but then Maria stopped at one page, tapping it with her pen. "Here." She turned the paper toward me. "This signature on the property transfer. It's dated 3 weeks ago, when you were still deployed." I leaned forward, my throat tightening. The signature looked like mine, but something was off, like seeing your reflection in warped glass. "That's not my handwriting." Ed's chair creaked as he leaned in. "You sure about that, Jim?" "Positive. I'd signed enough military documents to fill a library. The R is wrong. I loop it different." Maria's eyes lit up like she'd just found a treasure map. "And here." "And here." She pulled out more documents, property deals, investment papers, all with that almost, but not quite version of my signature. All involving transactions with Chase Donnelly's real estate company. "That's forgery," Ed growled, his face darkening like storm clouds rolling in. "It is." Maria sat back, folding her hands. "But forgery alone isn't enough. We need to prove she used marital assets to directly benefit Chase's business ventures. Without that connection, it's just questionable paperwork." I felt that familiar combat tension creeping in, the calm before all hell breaks loose. What exactly do we need? "Proof they're working together. Evidence they used your money for his business deals." She tapped her pen against the desk. "If we could catch them trying to flip property acquired through deception." Ed had been quiet for a while, but now he straightened up, that old sergeant's look in his eye. "You thinking what I'm thinking, Maria?" She smiled, the kind of smile that makes you glad she's on your side. "Set the bait?" "Set the bait," Ed confirmed, turning to me. "Jim, how do you feel about doing some undercover work?" The plan came together over coffee that had been sitting too long in the break room pot. We'd create a fake investor profile, make it look like easy money walking through the door. Chase wouldn't be able to resist. Guys like him never can. "He'll try to move fast," Maria explained, sketching out timelines. "Men like Chase, they get greedy when they smell cash. He'll want to flip whatever properties he can, including ones he acquired through Amy's activities. And when he does," Ed added, "we'll have him by the short hairs." I sat there, listening to them lay it out, feeling that slow burn in my gut. The same feeling I used to get before a night mission, that mix of focus and fury that keeps you sharp. "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3, to set everything up properly. Maria started gathering the files. "We'll need to create a solid paper trail for your investor persona. Make it bulletproof." Ed's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and steady. "You okay with this, Jim?" It's going to get messy. I thought about Amy's email, about our empty house, about Chase's smug face in all those real estate photos. I've been in messier places. This is different, Ed warned. This isn't combat. This is chess. No, I said, my voice harder than I meant it to be. This is war, just a different kind. Maria looked up from her papers, studying my face. Remember, we do this by the book. One wrong move and we lose everything. I nodded, feeling that combat calm settle over me. 20 years in uniform teaches you patience, teaches you to wait for the right moment. And right then, looking at those forged signatures, I knew exactly what I was waiting for. Ed helped me set up a fresh Gmail account under the name Robert Mitchell. Simple, forgettable, just another retired service member looking to invest his pension. We crafted the perfect bait, a response to one of those investors wanted listings that always float around military towns. The message was short. Recently retired military, looking for investment properties in the area. Prefer direct seller contact. Cash buyer. I hit send and tried not to think about how many of these Chase probably got every week. But sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, or maybe just a sense of justice. Within 3 hours, my burner phone buzzed. Mr. Mitchell, Chase Donnelly here, Premier Properties. Got your inquiry. Always excited to work with fellow veterans. Would love to show you some exclusive listings via video call. Tomorrow work for you? My hand tightened around the phone. Even his text messages oozed false charm. Ed, reading over my shoulder, gave a low whistle. Fish on the line, he muttered. You sure you can keep it together face to face? Have to. I typed back a quick confirmation for 2 p.m. the next day. That night, in the RV, I practiced. Shaved closer than usual, combed my hair different. Worked on pitching my voice slightly higher, adding a hint of Texas to my usual Midwest drawl. Small changes, enough to blur the edges of recognition without risking a slip-up. Ever notice how the hardest part of lying is remembering who you're supposed to be? That's why the best cover stories stay close to home. The next day, I set up in Ed's office. Professional background, decent lighting. At exactly 2 p.m., the video call connected. And there he was, Chase Donnelly in all his synthetic glory. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect tie. The kind of smile that probably practiced itself in mirrors. Bob, great to connect. He leaned into the camera like we were old friends. How long you been out of the service? Just retired. 20 years, looking to put my pension to work. I kept my answers short, played up the eager amateur angle. Smart man. Real estate's the best investment right now, actually. He shuffled some papers, but I could tell it was for show. I might have something perfect for you. Just listed, not even on the market yet. Pristine lakefront property, fantastic bones, just need some TLC. My stomach clenched. He couldn't mean. Let me share my screen. A few clicks, and there it was. My house, our house, the place where I'd planned to grow old with Amy. Beautiful craftsman style, built in '92. Previous owners took great care of it. 3-bed, 2-bath, private dock access. Previous owners. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. Previous owners, like we were, just names on a deed, not people whose lives he'd helped destroy. The kitchen's recently updated, he continued, flipping through photos I'd taken myself last year. Granite counters, stainless appliances. Master bedroom has this gorgeous view of the lake, perfect for morning coffee. I knew that view. Knew exactly how the sun painted the water at dawn, how the mist rolled in during fall mornings. Knew the creak in the third floorboard and the way the screen door caught if you didn't lift it just right. Price point's excellent for the market. Previous situation led to a motivated seller. His smile widened. We're asking $425,000, but for a serious cash buyer. Every word was a knife, but I kept my face neutral. Interested but not eager. Sounds promising. You mentioned it needs some work? Minor stuff. Some updating in the guest bath, maybe fresh paint. Nothing major. He waved away 20 years of my life like it was dust on a shelf. I can send you the full inspection report, recent comps, property history, whatever you need to make an informed decision. I'd appreciate that. I forced myself to smile, especially interested in the ownership history, loan documents, that sort of thing. Of course, I'll have my office send everything over today. Chase beamed, probably already spending his commission in his head. I really think this could be perfect for you, Bob. Properties like this, with such rich history, they don't come along often. Rich history, if he only knew. Looking forward to reviewing everything, I said, and meant it more than he could possibly understand. Send it all through. After we disconnected, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. Ed appeared in the doorway. How'd it go? I looked up at him, feeling that combat calm settle in again. He's trying to sell me my own house. Ed and I spent the next 3 days buried in paperwork. You ever try matching bank records against property documents? It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are blank and the other half are lying to you. But that's the thing about paper trails. They always lead somewhere if you follow them long enough. Look at this, Ed said, spreading documents across his desk. The morning sun filtered through his office blinds, casting stripes across transaction records and deed transfers. The timing's perfect. Down payment hit the seller's account exactly 2 days after your joint savings was emptied. I leaned in, coffee going cold in my hands. The numbers matched perfectly. $117,000 withdrawn from our account, $115,000 down payment on the house. The remaining $2,000? Probably Chase's consulting fee. She didn't even try to hide it, I muttered. Remember when I said the best cover stories stay close to home? Well, the worst criminals make simple mistakes. Just moved it straight from one account to another. Ed's finger traced down a column of dates. And here's where it gets interesting. Chase listed himself as the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. Double-dipped on commission while using your money to secure the deal. Our attorney, Marcus, arrived around noon. He'd been handling veteran cases for 15 years, and I could see the predatory gleam in his eyes as we laid out our findings. This is textbook fraud, he said, adjusting his reading glasses. Unauthorized use of marital assets, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, potential tax evasion. He looked up at me. But we need one more piece. What's that? Direct acknowledgement. If we can get Chase on record admitting he knew where the money came from? Marcus spread his hands. That's game over. I felt that familiar pre-mission tension coil in my gut. I can get him talking. Ed raised an eyebrow. You sure about that, Jim? One slip and he might recognize you. Trust me. I pulled out my phone. Our friend Chase loves nothing more than bragging about his wins. I stepped into the hallway and sent a quick email from my fake account. 20 minutes later, Chase's face filled my screen again, that 1,000-watt smile still firmly in place. Bob, great to hear from you. Did you review those documents? Sure did. I kept my voice casual, interested. Just one question. I noticed Amy Rourke's name on some of the paperwork. She involved in this deal? Chase's smile widened. You could almost see his ego preening. Amy? Oh, don't worry about that. I took care of her. He actually winked at the camera. Let's just say she's very satisfied with the arrangement we worked out. So you two are? Together? Yeah, you could say that. He laughed, probably thinking he was sharing some clever secret. Sometimes these things just work out perfectly, you know? Right person, right time, right opportunity. I felt my jaw tighten but forced myself to chuckle. Sounds like quite a story. Oh, it is. But hey, he leaned forward, conspiratorial. Between us, she's much happier now. Her ex was never around, always overseas. She needed someone who could be there, show her the finer things in life. Every word was recorded, every admission another nail in his professional coffin. I wrapped up the call quickly after that, claiming another appointment. Back in Ed's office, Marcus was already drafting complaints. One for the IRS, detailing potential tax fraud and unreported income. Another for the State Real Estate Board, outlining ethical violations and misuse of client funds. The final one? A civil suit that would freeze every asset Chase had touched in the last 6 months. How long? I asked, watching Marcus's printer spit out page after page. Once we file, The IRS moves quick on cases like this. He gathered the papers, signing each with practiced efficiency. Real estate board might take longer, but they'll suspend his license immediately pending investigation. Ed clapped my shoulder. Now we wait. I nodded, thinking about Chase's smug face, his casual admission of betrayal. You know what they say about pride coming before a fall? Sometimes it needs a little push. Marcus slid the complaints into a manila envelope, sealed it with deliberate care. I'll file these first thing tomorrow. Better buckle up. This is going to get bumpy. I watched him leave, then turned to Ed. Think they'll see it coming? He snorted. People like that, they never do. Living in that RV was like being back in a deployment shelter, minus the sense of purpose. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of old canvas and cheaper coffee, counting days like ammunition. 41 of them, to be exact. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting for something? Like molasses in winter. I kept myself busy with odd jobs around the neighborhood, fixing fences, patching roofs. Anything to keep my hands moving and my mind from wandering to darker places. The pension deadline loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. 18 days left. Sometimes at night I'd catch myself staring at old photos on my phone, wondering how I'd missed the signs. You know that hollow feeling when memories turn sour? Yeah, it was like that. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was under my buddy's truck, changing his oil, when my phone buzzed. Marcus's number lit up the screen. Jim? His voice had that controlled excitement lawyers get when things go their way. The IRS just approved our complaint. They've frozen all of Chase's accounts pending investigation. I slid out from under the truck, wiping grease from my hands. All of them? Every single one. Personal and business. He can't touch a dime without federal approval. Marcus paused for effect. And there's more. The state real estate board just suspended his license. Effective immediately. The news hit like a shot of good whiskey, warm satisfaction with a bite of justice. I remembered Chase's smug face during that video call, how easily he'd bragged about taking care of things. What about Amy? I asked, that familiar tightness creeping back into my chest. That's actually why I called. The court approved our motion for discovery. She's been served with a subpoena, has to testify under oath about the money transfers and property deals. I sat down on an old tire, letting that sink in. After weeks of silence, of her hiding behind blocked numbers and changed emails, she'd have to face what she'd done. In person. Under penalty of perjury. When? Hearing set for next Thursday. 10 a.m. sharp. Marcus's tone turned serious. Jim, this is exactly what we needed. She can't dodge questions anymore. One lie under oath, and she won't lie. I cut in, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Amy's many things, but she's not stupid. She'll crack before she commits perjury. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I must have checked my phone 100 times, half expecting some desperate message from either of them. Nothing came. Just silence, the heavy kind that comes before an explosion. That evening, Ed dropped by the RV with a 6-pack of root beer. He'd been sober 20 years. And a stack of papers. Thought you might want to see these, he said, spreading them across my small fold-out table. They were printouts from local real estate websites. Chase's listings had vanished. His fancy office profile? Gone. Even his social media accounts had gone dark. It was like watching a castle crumble in real time. Word travels fast in this business, Ed commented, cracking open his root beer. Nobody wants to touch a realtor under federal investigation. I nodded, remembering how Chase used to brag about his golden reputation at neighborhood barbecues. Now that gold was turning to lead, dragging him down with its weight. You holding up okay? Ed asked, studying my face. The question caught me off guard. Was I? The anger had shifted somehow, turned from a burning rage into something colder, more focused. I'm getting there, I answered honestly. Good. He pulled one more document from his jacket, a thick envelope with a court seal. Because this just came to my office. It's Amy's subpoena confirmation. She signed for it this morning. I held the paper, feeling its weight. After all these weeks of her ghosting me, of wondering where she'd gone and what she was thinking, here was proof she couldn't hide anymore. The court would make her look me in the eye and explain herself. Ed watched me carefully. You ready for that? Seeing her again? I folded the confirmation and tucked it away. Had 6 weeks to prepare. Besides, I gestured around at the RV's cramped interior. Not like I've got much left to lose. But that wasn't entirely true. I still had my pension hanging by a thread, and the clock wasn't slowing down. 13 days left to secure a permanent address. The end game was approaching, but I couldn't celebrate yet. Not until every piece was in place. The courthouse hallway smelled like old wood and anxiety. I adjusted my dress uniform's collar, making sure every ribbon and medal sat perfectly straight. 20 years of service wrapped up in colored bars and polished brass. All rise! The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. I stood with military precision as Judge Martinez entered. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Amy's first glimpse of me in uniform. Her breath hitched. She'd always said the uniform was what first drew her to me at that bass mixer 12 years ago. Please be seated, Judge Martinez said, shuffling through papers. We're here regarding case number 2023, CV4891, Rourke v. Rourke, concerning allegations of financial misconduct and fraudulent property transfers. I sat ramrod straight, hands folded on the table. Marcus, my attorney, had positioned me perfectly. Amy would have to look right at me while testifying. Mrs. Rourke, please approach the stand. Amy rose shakily. Her designer outfit couldn't hide how pale she'd gotten. The clerk swore her in, and I watched her right hand tremble as she raised it. Marcus started gentle, establishing basics. Yes, she'd managed our finances during deployment. Yes, she'd used my power of attorney. Yes, she knew Chase professionally before the divorce. Then came the documents. Mrs. Rourke, I'm showing you Exhibit A14, Marcus said, displaying the first signature comparison. Can you explain why your husband's signature appears on these property documents when he was verifiably deployed overseas? Amy's eyes darted between the papers and me. I had power of attorney. For necessary household matters, yes. But did that authority extend to transferring marital assets into private business ventures with Mr. Chase? Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. We needed to act quickly on the investment opportunity. So you admit to signing these documents in your husband's name? Yes, but Marcus didn't let her finish. And these bank transfers? He presented another exhibit. $117,000, moved in 3 installments to accounts co-owned by you and Mr. Chase? Amy's composure cracked. A tear smeared her mascara. You don't understand. Jim was never home. Always deployed. Chase showed me I could have my own life. My own income. By misappropriating your husband's military pay? Objection, Amy's lawyer called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Rephrase, counselor. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Rourke, were you aware that using power of attorney to transfer marital assets for personal gain constitutes fraud under state law? She didn't answer, just stared at her manicured hands. And now, Marcus continued, I'd like to play Exhibit C7. The familiar audio filled the courtroom. Chase's voice, cocky and clear. Yeah, Amy's taken care of. We've got plans for that joint account money. Prime lakefront properties ready to flip. Her husband's deployment was perfect timing. Amy's face crumpled. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I kept my expression neutral, but my chest felt tight. Not from pain anymore, from something else. Something final. The judge called a brief recess. When we reconvened, her ruling was swift and absolute. The court finds clear evidence of fraudulent conduct, Judge Martinez declared. Mrs. Rourke's actions represent a serious breach of fiduciary duty and abuse of power of attorney. I'm ordering full financial restitution of $117,000, plus statutory damages. She turned to address property matters. Regarding the lakefront parcel in question, given it was purchased separately with non-marital funds, full ownership is granted to Mr. Rourke. Mrs. Rourke's claim to any interest in said property is hereby denied. The gavel crack echoed like a rifle shot. Amy tried to catch my eye as she left, but I focused on gathering my papers. Marcus shook my hand, grinning. "Congratulations, Jim. Justice served." I nodded, straightening my jacket. "Thank you. For everything." Walking out those courthouse doors felt like emerging from a long tunnel. The autumn air hit my face, clean and sharp. I'd walked in weighted down by betrayal and walked out standing tall, not just vindicated, but victorious. Ed waited by his truck, beaming. "Need a ride to celebrate?" "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "I need to make one more stop first. Got some paperwork to file before the pension deadline." The final court documents arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in Ed's borrowed RV, sunlight streaming through dusty windows, and spread the papers across the fold-down table. Each page felt heavy with consequence, like artillery coordinates finally finding their target. Remember those old Western movies where the hero rides off into the sunset while the bad guys get their comeuppance? Real life isn't usually that neat, but sometimes it comes close. The local paper lay next to the court papers, its headline stark and unforgiving. "Real estate agent's license revoked amid fraud investigation." Below that, a smaller article detailed how Chase's reputation was imploding. 3 other clients had come forward with similar complaints. The state board wasn't just suspending him anymore, they were making an example of him. Amy hadn't fared much better. Her social circle, those country club friends she'd cultivated so carefully, had scattered like leaves in a storm. Nobody wants to associate with someone who defrauded a deployed soldier. Funny how karma works, isn't it? I picked up my coffee mug, that old military-issue one that had followed me through 3 deployments, and took a long sip. The bitter taste matched my mood. Not angry anymore, just worn. 20 years of marriage reduced to exhibit numbers and legal terminology. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Heirs officially open their investigation into Chase. Amy's being questioned as a person of interest." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The wheels of justice were turning without my help now. Opening my laptop, I logged into the county records website. Time to transfer the lake property into my trust, something I should have done months ago. The process was surprisingly simple. A few clicks, some digital signatures, and that quiet piece of paradise was legally secured. No fanfare, no victory parade, just the soft whir of my ancient laptop fan and the sound of morning traffic outside. You know what's strange? I thought this moment would feel bigger, like winning a major battle or completing a crucial mission. Instead, it felt more like finishing a long patrol, exhausted but satisfied, knowing you did what needed doing. The RV creaked as I stood up. Cardboard boxes lined one wall, packed with what remained of my life here. 20 years in this town, reduced to 6 boxes and a duffel bag. I'd already donated most of my furniture to a veterans shelter. Seemed fitting somehow. Through the window, I could see the "for sale" sign on what used to be our house. Chase's face had been removed from the realtor placard, small mercies. A young couple was viewing it yesterday. They looked happy, full of plans. I hoped they'd make better memories there than my last ones. Something caught my eye in the bottom of my coffee mug. A small crack running along the rim, probably from all the packing and moving. Kind of like marriage, I suppose. You don't notice the cracks forming until everything finally breaks. I reached for my jacket, felt the envelope in the inside pocket. One last thing to do before leaving town. Something I'd been thinking about since the court date. Ed had asked me why bother? Why not just drive away and never look back? But he didn't understand. This wasn't about Amy anymore, or even about me. It was about closing the book properly, ending the story right. The envelope wasn't heavy, but it carried weight. Inside was a single sheet of paper, my final letter to Amy. No accusations, no bitter words. Just 3 things. The date we first met, the coordinates of where I proposed, and one line. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Sometimes the heaviest burden we carry isn't anger. It's the memory of love turned sour. And sometimes the strongest thing we can do is simply set that burden down and walk away. I gathered the court documents into my filing box, carefully sealed the envelope, and checked my watch. The moving truck would be here in an hour. Time to start loading up. The lake property was waiting, and I had plans for that piece of land. Good plans, honest ones. My new coffee maker was already packed away, so I took one last sip from my cracked mug. Outside, the morning was turning into one of those perfect fall days, crisp air, clear sky, endless possibility. The drive to the lake house took just under 2 hours. I'd mapped it out dozens of times during deployment, imagining this moment, but reality hit different. The gravel crunched under my truck's tires as I pulled onto the narrow access road, tall pines closing in on both sides. My chest tightened with each landmark I recognized from the property listing: the crooked oak, the rusty mile marker, that old stone wall running along the north boundary. You ever notice how some moments feel like they're happening in slow motion? That's how it felt when I rounded that final bend and saw it for the first time. My lake house. Not Amy's, not Chase's, mine. The afternoon sun caught the weathered siding just right, making it glow like burnished copper. I killed the engine and just sat there for a minute, letting it sink in. The place needed work, no doubt about it. Weeds had taken over what used to be a flower bed, climbing halfway up the front porch. The mailbox listed to one side like a drunk trying to stay upright. Paint peeled from the window frames in long, curling strips. But damn, if it wasn't the most beautiful sight I'd seen in months. Stepping out of the truck, I breathed in deep. The air smelled different here, clean pine and lake water, with none of that city exhaust. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the soft lapping of waves against the shoreline. Back in the sandbox, I used to play this sound in my headphones to help me sleep. The key stuck a bit in the front door lock, another item for my growing to-do list. Inside was exactly as the listing photos showed: empty rooms with good bones, waiting for someone to care about them again. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through bare windows. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors, each board creaking its own welcome. But the dock, that's what called to me. I'd saved that for last, like dessert after a long-awaited meal. The wooden planks felt solid under my feet as I walked out over the water. Near the end, I noticed someone had mounted an old bench, weathered gray but still sturdy. Perfect spot for morning coffee, I thought, remembering those lonely pre-dawn hours in the barracks when I'd dream about exactly this. Standing there at the edge, letting the wind hit my face, something shifted inside me. Like a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there, finally sliding off my shoulders. The water stretched out before me, rippling with late afternoon light, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Ed's ringtone. Had to smile at his timing. "You make it okay?" His gruff voice carried that same steady concern I remembered from our platoon days. "Just got here." I settled onto the bench, watching a pair of ducks cut across the lake. "You should see this place, Ed." "That bad, huh?" "Nothing I can't fix." I ran my hand along the bench's arm, already planning where I'd sand and reseal. "Need some TLC, but the structure's solid. Kinda like you, old friend." We both went quiet for a moment, letting that sink in. Ed had seen me through the worst of it, the rage, the despair, the nights when revenge felt like the only option left. But he'd also shown me another way through. "Got something here you might appreciate," I said, pulling out the 2 tin camping mugs I'd brought along. One was my old service mug, the other I'd picked up at the surplus store yesterday. "Time for that toast you promised me." I heard him chuckling, followed by the clink of his own mug. "What are we drinking to?" "New beginnings?" I suggested, pouring a finger of bourbon into each cup. The liquid caught the setting sun, glowing amber. "To new beginnings," Ed echoed, "and to battles won with honor." We sipped in companionable silence, separated by miles but connected by something deeper. The bourbon warmed my chest, but it wasn't the only reason I felt heat there. "You know," Ed said finally, "this was never about getting even." "No," I agreed, watching the sun paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. "It was about rebuilding, starting fresh. Speaking of which," I could hear his grin through the phone, "you got a plan for that mailbox? Because if it leans any further, your mail's gonna end up in the lake. You ever notice how working with your hands can heal parts of you that talking never reaches?" The first week at the lake house, I threw myself into the basics, patching that leaky roof before the next rain, replacing rotted boards on the porch, and getting the utilities switched over. My muscles ached in ways that had nothing to do with PT or combat readiness. This was different. Every nail driven, every board replaced felt like stitching up an old wound. The roof took 3 solid days. Up there with nothing but blue sky above me, I had plenty of time to think about everything that had led me here. The betrayal still stung, sure, but it was dulling, like an old injury that only acts up in bad weather. I remembered how Amy used to talk about wanting a view of the water. Now I had one, just not the way either of us had planned. Need a hand with that? I looked down to see my nearest neighbor, Bob, standing in my driveway. He was retired Air Force. I'd spotted his service flag right away. We'd waved to each other a few times, but this was our first real conversation. "Appreciate the offer," I called back, wiping sweat from my forehead. "But I think I need to do this one solo." He nodded like he understood completely. Maybe he did. "Well, Carol, that's my wife. She's making her famous meatloaf tonight. You're welcome to join us." That's how it started. Small kindnesses from people who had no idea what I'd been through. They just saw a guy fixing up an old lake house, nothing more. There was something pure about that, being judged only by what they could see, not by my past or my scars. The porch came next. I stripped it down to the bones, replacing anything that looked suspect. Found myself talking to the wood sometimes, telling it stories as I worked, about Chase's smug face in court, about Amy's tears when the truth came out, about Ed's unwavering support when I needed it most. The porch just listened, accepting each new board without judgment. Remember those tin cups Ed and I toasted with? I decided they needed a proper home. Spent a weekend building a simple bench for the dock, wide enough for 2 people to sit comfortably and watch the sunrise. Added a small shelf underneath, perfectly sized for those mugs. Every morning, I'd pour my coffee and sit out there, planning the day's projects while ducks paddled by. Some days were harder than others. Found a box of old photos while clearing out the shed, previous owners' memories, not mine. But seeing those happy families, those captured moments, it hit me fresh. 20 years with Amy, reduced to courthouse documents and empty rooms. The betrayal wasn't just about money or property. It was about faith, in love, in loyalty, in the simple belief that dedication matters. But you know what? Working on the house taught me something important about patience. You can't rush good repairs. Every fix needs its own time, its own process. Rush it, and you'll just have to do it again later. Same with healing, I guess. Neighbors would stop by occasionally, offering tools or advice or just friendly conversation. They saw the improvements happening day by day, the fresh paint, the cleared yard, the fixed mailbox standing proud and straight. What they didn't see was the man being rebuilt alongside the house. One evening, about 6 weeks in, I sat on my dock bench watching the sunset. The house behind me was solid again. Secure. The roof didn't leak, the porch didn't creak, and every window opened smoothly. My pension was safe in my account, and my deed was filed with the county. I'd done more than just survive Amy's betrayal or outmaneuver Chase's greed. I'd outlasted them both. The lake turned golden as the sun dipped lower, reminding me of something my dad used to say. "Son, the best revenge is building a good life." Looking around at what I'd created here, not just the repairs but the peace I'd found in making them, I finally understood what he meant. A fish jumped somewhere out in the deep water, sending ripples across the calm surface. I sipped my coffee, letting the quiet settle around me like a comfortable blanket. The bench held me steady, each board cut and placed by my own hands. Whole again, different maybe, but stronger for having been broken. The mist rolled across the lake like nature's own curtain call, thick enough to blur the far shore but gentle enough to let the first hints of sunrise filter through. I settled deeper into my dock bench, wrapping both hands around my steaming coffee mug. The metal was warm against my palms, a small comfort against the morning chill. You know those moments when everything just feels right? When the world stops spinning quite so fast, and you can finally catch your breath? That's what this morning felt like. Pure, clean, mine. The lake stretched out before me, mirror smooth except where fish occasionally broke the surface, sending ripples across that perfect reflection. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, that haunting sound that seems to carry all the wilderness in its echo. I'd learned their patterns over these past weeks, watching them dive and surface, living their uncomplicated lives. The coffee steam mingled with the morning mist, and I found myself thinking about how different this scene was from those sleepless nights in the RV, when every shadow seemed filled with betrayal. Back then, the weight of Amy's deception and Chase's arrogance had pressed down like a physical thing, threatening to crush what was left of my spirit. But now there was just peace. The legal dust had settled completely. Chase's accounts remained frozen. His real estate license permanently revoked. Last I heard, he was facing federal charges for fraud. Turns out Amy wasn't his first partner in deception. Speaking of Amy, she'd lost more than just money. Her carefully crafted social image had shattered under the weight of public court records. No more charity board positions, no more country club memberships. Sometimes the truth is the sharpest weapon of all. A fish jumped nearby, the splash drawing my attention back to the present. The sun was pushing harder through the mist now, turning the water into liquid gold. My tin mug caught that same light, making the engraved words stand out in sharp relief. Some battles are won without firing a shot. Ed had given it to me the day after the court ruling. His way of marking the victory. He'd always understood that true strength isn't about throwing the hardest punch. It's about knowing when not to throw one at all. The house stood solid behind me, its fresh paint barely dry in some spots. Every repair, every improvement had been a step away from what was lost and toward what could be. The property was mine now, legally and morally, with no strings attached, no shared memories to haunt the halls, no bitter ghosts lurking in the corners. Just potential, waiting to be shaped. My pension sat secure in its own dedicated account, 20 years of service finally bearing fruit. Funny how close I'd come to losing it all. If Ed hadn't stepped in when he did, if we hadn't played our cards just right, but we had. We'd done it clean, done it legal, done it in a way that let me keep my honor while they lost theirs. The mist was thinning now, revealing more of the lake with each passing minute. A pair of ducks cut across the water, leaving twin trails in their wake. Their simple presence reminded me of something important. Nature doesn't care about human drama. The lake didn't know about betrayal or revenge. It just was, constant and unchanging, offering its peace to anyone willing to sit quietly and receive it. I turned the mug in my hands, watching the engraved words catch the strengthening light. The message wasn't just about winning. It was about winning right. About standing firm when the storm hits, about choosing the higher path even when the lower one looks easier. About understanding that sometimes the best victory is simply outlasting those who tried to break you. The sun finally broke free of the horizon, sending a bright path across the water straight to my dock. I sat there, letting that light wash over me, feeling the warmth of both the coffee and the dawn. No more looking over my shoulder. No more wondering what Amy and Chase were plotting. No more counting days until the next court date. Just this moment, this peace, this quiet victory. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.